What's up everybody, and welcome back to our channel. On today's video we're going to be talking about Polk County, Florida, as according to the new census report, it is the fastest growing county in the United States. We're going to understand exactly why people are moving to Polk County, Florida. Of course, the elephant in the room, Grady Judd, the sheriff of this county, is famous on social media, and many people feel that the reason Polk County is growing is because the sheriff there is doing just a great job. But that's not really what these analytics show. According to the new census information, people are leaving large expensive places like Miami, Los Angeles, and New York, and the counties that are showing the most growth in 2023 are counties that are somewhat suburban and thus more affordable. So we're talking about a national trend of people moving to areas that are more affordable and away from areas that are more expensive. And among those counties that are having the most growth, Polk County is number one. Also in the state of Florida, Pasco County, which is the Spring Hill area, and Marion County, which is the Ocala area, are also among the fastest growing counties in the country. These three counties of Polk, Pasco, and Marion are quite literally some of the worst places you could ever move to. People are not moving to these counties because they want to end up in these places. People are ending up in these counties because they have no other option. Polk County, Florida is the largest concentration of poverty in the entire state of Florida. Despite having nearly 800,000 people in this county, it is the only large county in Florida that has below average state incomes. The last thing you ever want to do is move to an urban area that is poor. And that is what exactly Polk County is. Most of the state's larger counties by population are going to be high-income counties, but Polk County is the only large urban center in the entire state that has below average incomes. In the state of Florida, people end up moving to above average income counties, and even then they struggle. So imagine moving to the largest center of urban poverty in the state of Florida. Your economical outlook will look very inadequate, to say the least. 16% of the population in Polk County is living in poverty. The unemployment rates are above the state average. But forget about the numbers. In all practical purposes, just about everybody that I have known that's moved to Lakeland, which is in Polk County, the largest city, have ended up having to go to Tampa, Sarasota, or Bradenton for work because there's quite literally no work in Polk County. In Lakeland, Florida, females are number 11 in the whole country for working in the occupations of construction and extraction. And that's not exactly a female occupation. That's something that single mothers and hood rat baby mamas are doing because they have no other choice. One of my homeboys' baby mama lives in Polk County. That should just let you know how bad that place is. And at least two of my ex-girlfriends currently live in Polk County.
Jose, go be sleeping outside, boy. You keep this up.
It's the type of place your toxic ex-girlfriends and baby mamas end up living. Some of the other towns that also ended up on that list, just so you can have a comparison of what the economical outlook of Lakeland, Florida is, are places like Dothan, Alabama, Baytown, Texas, and Port Arthur, Texas. We're talking some of the most abysmal economical situations you could think of. So yeah, when a large percentage of your female population ends up working jobs that usually males are doing, that should just give you an idea how hardship comes about in Lakeland, Florida. I'll be honest, these hood rat baby mamas are doing the absolute best they can to provide for their bastard children that other guys don't want to man up and take care of because they got a wife who will probably cut their heads off if she finds out about the situation.
Where's that machete you had lying around?
By income, Polk County is the 38th county in the state of Florida, so they're definitely not getting any points for bringing good jobs to their community. And there's a lot of misinformation about Polk County. Now you got Fox News saying they're the fastest growing community. A few years ago, they were saying that the job growth has been incredible in Polk County. But hold on a minute. When you actually look at these numbers, 38th in Florida for incomes, that is abysmal. And keep in mind, you're talking about in the state of Florida. And remember that in the state of Florida, if you get rid of the 1% of earners, the 99% in Florida makes less than the 99% in Alabama. So you're talking about a poor county in a poor state. Just to give you an idea, Leon County, that's where Tallahassee sits. It means it's a college town. As we know, college towns are not great for incomes because there are a lot of students. Is number 21 in the state of Florida for incomes. Jacksonville, Florida is number 20. You're talking it is considerably more poor than Tallahassee and Jacksonville. Citrus County, which is a rural county that has no large cities, it is mostly just retired folks moving to Citrus, is number 35 in income. So you're really gonna be talking about an extraordinarily poor county. There just are not enough incomes in this county. And that is probably why you don't want to end up here, despite the fact that Polk County is somewhat more affordable. An apartment that is $1,500 in Polk County would be about $1,800 in Sarasota or Manatee. But when you consider the fact that once you live in Polk County, you're going to be commuting to Sarasota or Manatee, those $300, you're going to spend it on gas, and then you're still commuting. It just doesn't make sense to live in Polk County. What makes living in Florida bearable is the fact that we have the best beaches in the United States, but Polk County is far inland, nowhere near beaches, and to get in and out of Polk County, you're going on Interstate 4, which is the busiest corridor in the entire state because it's just down the road from Orlando, which means that living in Polk County in general is an absolute nightmare because despite the fact you're in Florida, you're poor and there aren't even beaches. I get locked up, man. The sheriff said he gonna sleep with my baby mama, would it? Ain't happening, you hear me? He gonna sleep with my baby mama, you hear my little bussy baby? I ain't paying my child support, and I should sleeping with the sheriff from Polk. Can you imagine living in a county where if you get locked up for not paying your child support, next thing you know, the sheriffs are dating your baby mama while you locked up? Now that's just wrong. Then within Lakeland, you have 550 registered offenders. Right next door to Polk County is Osceola County. In Osceola County, there's this place called Ponciana. It's like one of the most Puerto Rican cities in the whole United States. Really, it's mostly Puerto Ricans there. There is one registered offender for every 22,000 people. Now in Davenport, which is in Polk County, there's one registered offender for every 52 people. So we're talking about what, like 500 times more registered offenders in this part of Polk County than there is right across the border in Osceola County. But that should just give you an idea how bad the situation is with registered offenders. So if you end up in the wrong community in Lakeland, Florida, or anywhere in Polk County, you can end up in a neighborhood where literally most of your neighbors could be registered offenders. So make sure before you buy something affordable in Polk County, Florida, you log into the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's website and you look at the address, because there are some streets and neighborhoods in Polk County that are practically nothing more than neighborhoods of registered offenders. Great place to put your dang family. Now, throughout the entire state of Florida, roughly about 1 in every 600 people is a registered offender. But some parts of Polk County, like Davenport, 52, Lake Alfred, 215, Winter Haven, 290, Haines City, 385. You get the idea. There's way too many registered offenders in this particular county of Florida. Did you hear me? 1 in every 52 people in Davenport is a registered offender. Cross the county line over into Ponciana, and it's 1 out of every 22,000 people. So if you want to put your family in a safe place, make sure you're right outside of Polk County county limits. Lakeland is number 79 of the cities with the highest number of thefts per 100,000 residents, because of course a city that has no incomes is going to have a lot of theft. Here's how you can't leave a crack pipe laying on the ground here for 5 seconds when you crack thing dunking up tight, take it. If you guys have watched my interviews of homelessness across the state of Florida, you might notice that most of the homeless people that we've interviewed that have lived in Polk County have told us it's been the absolute worst place in the entire state to be homeless because they can't even find food in the garbage when they're starving. A lot of the homeless people will go from one place to the next as they're homeless in the state of Florida, and they all tell me don't ever end up homeless in Polk County, Florida, because you will literally starve. I think it's saying like 4 homeless people who've already told me that. So now in Lakeland, about 15% of the population is living in poverty, but it is 30% for black residents. So black people, if you move to Lakeland, Florida, your chances of ending up in poverty are 2 times higher than the white population. That is absolutely dreadful. And it's 17% for Hispanics. So there doesn't seem to be any economical equality in this particular county.
We would never do that, Jose. We got black people in prison right now that are living just like the white folks that are locked up in there.
So for all the crap they talk on social media about how we're doing things right here in Polk County, Florida, no, they're not. In Lakeland, black people are 2 times as likely to end up living in poverty versus the white population. That is more lamentable than having your teenage daughter ask you to go to a Nicki Minaj concert. Another thing this area is notorious for are recovery homes, half-chance homes, non-institutional groups, halfway programs. You just have a lot of people that are dealing with a lot of addiction, incarceration, and all types of personal problems with the law. And thus, you have a situation in a lot of these cities in Polk County where a large percentage of the population is dealing with, well, their own personal troubles. Take Davenport. It is number 74 of the cities with the largest percentage of people in non-institutional group quarters. You may think that the reason people are moving to Polk County is because of their great and powerful lawyer, judge, cop, and hero of the community, Harry Pudd. Well, it's not because of Harry Pudd that people are moving to Polk County. In reality, people that are moving to Polk County are coming from number 1, Orange County, over 1.5% of them. 1.2% of them are coming from Osceola, and Hillsborough County makes up 1% of the population. So just so you understand, Polk County is halfway between Tampa and Orlando, 2 fast-growing and expensive metropolitan areas. Once you can no longer afford to live in Orlando or Tampa, then you end up in Polk County. So this whole notion that people are moving to Polk County because of the super cop just isn't true. In fact, the vast majority of the growth in Polk County is happening in the northeast side of the county, which is, by chance, adjacent to the Orlando theme parks. In other words, the real reason that Polk County has had a lot of growth in population, it is because it's right next to Orlando, and Orlando has nowhere else to grow. So Polk County ain't growing because it's great. It's growing because it's right next to Orlando. Kind of like what happened with Lee County, Florida, where it had a bunch of growth. Not because people wanted to live in Lee County, Florida, but because some couldn't afford to live in Naples anymore, and some people were commuting into Naples. And that's kind of what's happening in Polk County, Florida. It's not all of a sudden that Polk County is a great place to move to. It's that people are having to relocate there because they can't afford to live in the state's larger cities. Take Davenport, Florida. In 2016, the average cost of a building there was going for $84,000. In 2021, that number had skyrocketed to $339,000. Now, Davenport is now 60% Hispanic and 20% black, with the white population being only 20%. Another misconception about the growth in Polk County is that it's mostly evangelical whites that are moving to this county to be part of the great community that they got going on there. In reality, it's mostly Hispanics and blacks who can no longer afford to live in their fast-growing cities like Miami, Tampa, and Orlando. Now, Florida just has a reputation of disconfiguring the proper representation of the growth in the state. The growth in the state of Florida is predominantly due to the Hispanic community. But they want to portray it like these are fast-growing communities because everything's going perfect in the state of Florida. But in reality, it's mostly Hispanics and blacks that are fleeing places like Miami, Broward, Orlando. They can't afford it anymore. So no, it's not white evangelicals that are moving to Polk County to vote red. That's not really the realistic representation of the people that are moving to Polk County. The vast majority of people that are moving to Polk County are people like Haitians, just people that can't afford to live in South Florida anymore. Talking about Haitians, there's a huge community of Haitians in Polk County, Florida, and with some communities, the largest ancestry group being Haitian. Only 56% of the population in Polk County voted for Trump in 2020, so let's not get these numbers misconstrued. A lot of people believe that Polk County is this massive red stronghold, and in reality, it's almost about average compared to the state of Florida. Polk County is only about 50% white at this point. So I think there's a lot of just kind of misinformation or just the narrative that's being put out on social media about what Polk County really isn't really the realistic representation of the county. There's just this idea that this is mostly a white evangelical county and that everybody's a Trump supporter, but that really isn't what the analytics show. The Hispanic and black population is growing at a rate faster than the white population. There's only 400,000 white people in Polk County, 250,000 roughly Hispanic, probably more than that considering that there's a lot of illegals. And then blacks are going to be about 110,000 or about 15% of the population. So realistically, the idea that people have about Polk County, that it's this white country rural area, isn't even realistic. And even most bizarre that many people who are anti-immigration think that Polk County is this haven where there are no illegals, when in reality, because of the agriculture industries that are present here, it actually has one of the highest percentages of illegals of anywhere in the state of Florida. So it's bizarre, to say the least, that a county that has a huge illegal population, most of the people here are struggling. There's a lot of registered offenders, wants to portray itself like it's a place of law and order. Now, to be honest, the homicide rate in Polk County is below the state average. That's a good thing. At about 5 per 100,000, 7 per 100,000. It's a state average, so you don't really have a lot of murders. Despite the fact that the sheriff does cover a lot of murders on his news coverage, it really misrepresents the whole reality of living in that county because for the most part, you got 800,000 people, so crap's gonna happen regardless. You would think of as many homicides as the news and social media covers that Polk County would have a homicide rate above the state average, but it really doesn't. The reason you're seeing all these news stories covered is because it's a great opportunity for the sheriff to end up in front of the camera, and that's his favorite thing to do too. So yeah, if you're a very photogenic individual looking for a lot of attention, then you would definitely cover every last one of these stories, which would make people think that there's a huge homicide problem in Polk County, but there really isn't. What there is great opportunities to take photos so people can say, I'm doing a good job, ain't I, honey? Surprisingly, the overdose death rate in Polk County is actually significantly less than the state of Florida. Not significantly, but it's still less than the state average. You would assume that the black and Hispanic population would drag down the overdose death rate, but it turns out that that's not actually the case. The white population also has a fairly low or state average type of overdose death rate, which is interesting because you would think that a poor county like this would definitely have an overdose problem, but they don't. So you don't really have a lot of homicides, you don't really have a lot of overdoses, and those are two great analytics about this county. And in other counties in Florida, you have this disparaging difference where the black and the Hispanic population hold down the overall death rates for the county for overdoses because the white people are just disproportionately having way more overdoses than everybody else. That's happening in a lot of counties in Florida, like take Jacksonville, for example. But it's not really the case in Polk County. It just generally doesn't have a lot of overdoses, generally doesn't have a lot of homicides. So the notion that those categories of crime are high, well, it definitely caught me off guard for sure. Interestingly, the other counties in Florida that are having an explosion of population right now, Marion County, Pasco County, those counties actually have ridiculously high overdose death rates. In fact, a few years back, they would have had the highest in the entire state of Florida, but it's no longer the case. It's kind of reducing a little bit. So we can see as people are moving into these counties, they do reduce the overall percentage of the population that's addicted because it's mostly the native people who are dealing with this plague, and the people that are transplants, they're a little bit more normal, just trying to move somewhere and start a new life, so they're less likely to end up grasped by this lifestyle. It's mostly the native people, the people that are from there, that are dealing with this problem. But it's noteworthy to notice that unlike Marion County and unlike Pasco County that are real close by and they're growing fast as well, those counties are definitely having a huge drug problem. But the people that are moving to those counties are from a white demographic versus the people that are moving to Lakeland are most likely from a black or Hispanic demographic. So maybe that plays a percentage of a role, maybe not wholly, but regardless, Polk County doesn't have the same problem that counties a little bit further to the north are having. This little community called Inwood, right in the heart of Polk County, 15% of the population here is currently carpooling, and they are the 9th poorest place in the entire state of Florida, with something like 35% of their population living in poverty. So there's definitely pockets in Polk County that are really, really bad. Interestingly, the population in Inwood is about 1/3 white, 1/3 black, 1/3 Hispanic. So it's not really a racial disparaging thing there. It's just equally distributed poverty for everybody. But it's not just Inwood. There's also Wanetta, where 30% of the population is in poverty. 17% of the whites are in poverty, 34% of the Hispanics are in poverty, 100% of the American Indians are in poverty, and all other races are 35%. And as you hop from one part of Polk County to the next, there's some communities where it's the whites that are the most in poverty, there's some communities where it's the blacks that are most in poverty, and there are some communities where it's the whites. So there's a really weird poverty dynamic in this county where it's not just one group that's in poverty. As you hop from one city to the next, there's always one group that's the most disadvantaged economically. It could be the whites, the blacks, the Hispanics, but that's kind of interesting about Polk County. And I guess the lesson to learn from that is if you're moving to Polk County, you should probably gonna know exactly what city and what neighborhood you're gonna move to, because there are some interesting things. Like in Wanetta, the whites are only 17% in poverty, but if you hop in another area, the whites are gonna be more poor than everybody else. So just keep in mind that if you're moving to Polk County, you really need to look at your race and the makeup of the community you're gonna move to, because there's definitely some odd things going on there. It's just been my experience that you never want to be the marginalized race and move to a community where the people of your race are having a hard time. In the case of Polk County, whether you're white, Hispanic, or black, it's going to depend on the city and neighborhood you move to. So just really pay attention to where you end up if you're moving to Polk County, because you can end up in a community or a neighborhood that's really having a hard go at it. Not for everybody else, but for your particular race. But the general idea is something like this. If you have a poor white community and some poor blacks move in, those poor whites are going to be very resentful. And vice versa. You don't want to be a poor Hispanic or a poor white moving into a poor black area, because they're going to target you as well. So it's just a back and forth of racial politics going on here. Now, when you look at like children in delinquency, people in jails, and people in juvenile detention programs or juvenile delinquency, a lot of these cities in Polk County are really dealing with a problem that a lot of people are, well, there's no nice way of saying, but they're institutionalized, even on a juvenile level. Thus, keep in mind that that is a problem in this county. So despite the fact there isn't this raging drug problem, there isn't this raging homicide problem, but there are still a lot of people that get caught up with the law and are dealing with probation, or they're in some type of recovery program, or whatever the case may be. And maybe that is perhaps why Polk County has lower homicide rates and has lower overdose rates. But you should just know that there's a lot of people in Polk County that are somewhat institutionalized, and that also creates another problem, because a lot of people are in and out of the jails there. You have a lot of gangs in Polk County because a lot of people are in and out of the jails. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around the idea that a place doesn't have a lot of drug overdoses, doesn't have a lot of homicides, but they have a lot of gangs. But look at it like the city of Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles has a lot of gangs, but they don't really have high homicide rates. So it's more of a cultural thing than an actual criminal thing. Then you got other cities like Birmingham and Detroit that don't exactly have a huge gang culture, but they have a lot of crime. So, gang affiliation doesn't always come along with extraordinarily high crime rates. Now, one thing that I learned growing up in Florida, like I grew up in Collier County, Florida, and in Collier County, Florida, most of the black and Hispanic kids, particularly the males, ended up in these juvenile programs, ended up in these alternative learning centers, because the school system was somewhat prejudiced against them, and they made sure that they kind of got rid of them by putting them in these programs and screwing up their lives forever. So just from the fact that I went to school in the state of Florida, if I didn't know any better what these analytics really represent, it means that if you're coming from a marginalized background, chances are they're going to stack the odds against you and make sure that your kids are treated as criminals before they actually go out and commit crimes. Like, take it me. I was labeled as a gang member in middle school in North Naples. Let me tell you something. There were definitely no gangs in middle school in North Naples. It's a laughable idea, but that's what they do. They grab your kid in middle school and they say, okay, he's a gang member now. You know, let's put him in this alternative learning center and just prepare your child to be nothing more than a criminal. So it's a system that kind of targets marginalized kids and just kind of screws their life before they even get a chance to get started. And this has really been a theme for these counties in Florida that are trying to be the safest. St. Johns County, Collier County, Polk County, all these counties that want to present themselves as, you know, what we're talking about here today. And then these are the types of places where they'll grab your black or Hispanic kid or white kid that's coming from a poor Irish background and say, yep, you're a gang member. Let's put you in this alternative center. Let's screw up your life before you even get a chance to get started. I grew up in Naples, Florida, in a poor neighborhood. And out of the 10 kids that I grew up with, 9 of them went off to prison. I was the only one that really did not end up going to prison. And it was because every time the law enforcement would try to grab me and whatever, my community would get involved and they wouldn't let the cops take me. I remember growing up, literally people in my neighborhood throwing bottles and garbage at the cops if they were bothering me because, you know, my mom had cancer. We were just going through a bunch of crap and my neighbors all liked me and they weren't going to just let the cops come and harass me. So it's one of those situations where I got saved because my community didn't let me. But just about all the other kids in my neighborhood ended up going to prison. They're all gang members and they're all, like, their whole lives are ruined. And that's Naples, Florida, one of the safest places in the United States with the highest incomes. But if you are a poor, marginalized person and you end up living in an area that's not really where you're supposed to be, then this whole system is rigged up against you and they're going to make sure you fail one way or another. So when I go to Polk County and I see all these gangs and I see all these analytics that they have the most kids in these programs and the most juvenile delinquency, to me, that kind of would signal that law enforcement is kind of overstepping their boundaries and ruining people's lives prematurely. And I can understand that in a place like St. Johns County or Collier County where, say, we're going to discriminate the blacks and the Hispanics, but at least we got a bunch of rich white people here. But if it's a bunch of poor white people that are doing it, it's like, okay, there's not even an incentive to live in a place like that. I can understand a poor black person or a poor Hispanic person, like, okay, I know this place is rigged up against me, but I'm around a bunch of rich white people, maybe I'll make it. But why would you go do that amongst a bunch of poor white people? Doesn't make sense. Polk County is halfway between Tampa and Orlando, and compared to the rest of the country right now, Tampa and Orlando are very fair cities for equality. But then you get into the outskirts and the rural communities, and they're running a whole different program to marginalize you. So finally, one of the reasons I think we're going to finish today's video off on this topic is because overwhelmingly what everybody tells me about living in Polk County is how boring it is and how little there is to do in this county. When you look at Polk County, the amount of grocery stores is below the state average. The amount of convenience stores is above the state average. Things to do like restaurants are significantly below the state average. Just take a look at restaurants. In the state of Florida, there are 7.4 restaurants for every 10,000 people. That number is 4.9 in Polk County. So there are not many things to do in this county. There's not a lot of shopping. There's not a lot of restaurants. So one of the fatalities of living in Polk County is that there really isn't anything to do. And predominantly that is what the young people that have lived in Polk County are telling me. That is absolutely one of the most boring places you could live. It literally takes an hour to drive from one end of Lakeland to the other, and that is absolutely ridiculous. But in the middle, there's nothing but congestion, old buildings, old houses, residential areas. There isn't things to do here. Other than like almost 1,000 churches you can pick from, and I've talked to people who have gone to religious institutions like churches in Polk County, and they're telling me that the locals are really kind of cold. They're not welcoming. And what I find interesting about Polk County is that I've talked to several people that have moved to Polk County, and what they tell me about the county always is the same exact thing. They find the locals kind of cold, or they try to join community organizations and they just don't feel like they're welcome there. There's absolutely nothing to do. They're having to commute really long distances to get to another city for work. And then on top of all that, there's a lot of poverty, which means you can't find a job locally. All that contributes to making Polk County fairly an unattractive place to live, to be honest. To the point, I would almost rather be homeless here in Sarasota than have a house in Lakeland or Polk County where there's literally no life at all. All right, those are my thoughts on Polk County.